Let's go ahead and open up God's Word to Psalm 139. And the next several weeks, this is where we're going to be looking in Psalm 139 at this theme of at the feet of Jesus. That's what we're calling this. That's the title we're giving this psalm. Because the theme of Psalm 139 is that no matter what you do, no matter where you are, no matter what's going on around you, God's there. He is there with you. He is with you. And that is comforting to know that He is with us. But not only is He with us, but we're with Him. And that, to me, that, looking at it in that perspective brings even more comfort and more strength and more peace, that knowing that I'm with Him. And you understand who He is. He is the God of the universe. He is the Lord of lords. He is the King of kings. He is the one true God. And so whenever we are with Him, He never really leaves His throne. And so He always has that position of authority. So whenever we are with Him, we are at His feet. We are at His feet. Just to understand that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you are at the feet of Jesus. You're at His feet. That being at His feet, that's a place of worship. That's a place of us giving to Him. That's a place of surrender. But not only is it a place of worship and giving to Him and surrender, but it's also a place of receiving. That we are receiving from Him. We're receiving strength from Him. We're receiving wisdom from Him. We're receiving comfort from Him. So understand this, wherever you find yourself in the days ahead, wherever you've been and wherever you are right now, whether, if you find yourself in an ICU room, if you find yourself in the boss's office, if you find yourself in a waiting room somewhere, or in a courtroom, or at a funeral home, or just at the lowest point in your life, no matter where you are, you're at the feet of Jesus. You're at the feet of Jesus. He's there. And He is with us. And so, as I say that, some of you may even be, depending on what you're going through right now, you say, oh, that sounds good, but you don't know me. You're right, I don't, but He does. He does. And that's what Psalm 139 talks about, especially in these first 6 verses we're going to look at this morning. And that is this, that there is a Lord who knows you. You might even as well say that's one of His names. He is the Lord who comforts you. He is the Lord who cares for you. He is the Lord who protects you. He's the Lord who shepherds you, but He's always the Lord who knows you. He knows you. Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6, he says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me, and such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it." When we talk about the Lord who knows you, of course you say, of course He knows me. He knows me because He knows everything. We use the big word that we use for that is omniscience. Omniscience means all-knowing. God is an omniscient God. He is an all-knowing God. You agree with that? You understand that? There's not anything that He does not know. He's an all-knowing God. But understand, when the Bible talks about Him being all-knowing, it doesn't mean that He just knows all the facts. By the way, He does. He knows all the facts that have ever been written. He knows everything that has ever been written, and He knows things that haven't even been written about. He knows all the facts about everything. But when we talk about a God who knows everything, I want you to understand, He knows people, and He knows you. He knows you. That is the God that we have. He knows everything about it. And here in these verses I just read, I don't know if you caught it or not, but there's this interchange between the psalmist and God. There's a lot of personal pronouns going on. Matter of fact, 13 times in these 6 verses, he mentions the word I or me or my. And he's not doing that in a prideful way, because it's interchanges. 6 times he uses the word you and yours. So it's me and you. It's I I and you. It is mine and yours. And so he's going back and forth. There's this personal thing that he is talking about here with God. And so God personally knows everything about us. I mentioned the psalmist here. The psalmist that is writing this is David. And David knew God, but not only did he know God, God knew David. And by the way, God doesn't know David any better than he knows you. But think about David. God, what is he saying here when he says, you know me, you know everything about me? What is he saying there? He's saying that God knew him, that everywhere all of his life was spent at the feet of Jesus. When he was out in the field as a shepherd boy taking care of sheep, he was at the feet of Jesus. When he was faced Goliath, the reason he had the courage to take on Goliath and the faith is because he knew he was at the feet of Jesus, the conquering one, and that he could trust him with that. When he was called to be king, it wasn't that he said, I can do this. No, he knew that the only way he could do it is because he would be at the feet of Jesus, and Jesus would lead him and walk with him every step of the way. Even when Saul was coming after him, when he was in the cave and it was frustrating and it was dark and it was challenging, and he wondered when he would begin to see the promises of God fulfilled in his life, he still trusted God. Why? Because even in the dark cave, he was at the feet of Jesus. And in temptation and failure in his life, the moment that he was exposed and the Spirit's conviction overwhelmed him, he found himself at the feet of Jesus. All throughout his life, every second of his life was spent at the feet of Jesus. And that is true of us as well. And so let's look through this passage and let's understand who Jesus knows, or what Jesus knows. What does Jesus know? Well, first of all, understand this. Jesus knows you. He knows you. He knows everything about you. Verse 1 says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." Well, he knows your name. And there's never a time that God has to say when we come to him and say, "Hey, God, it's Doug." And he goes, "Doug who?" He doesn't ever do that. He knows me and he knows you. He knows you thoroughly. It says there that he searches us. The idea of searching is the idea of piercing, of cutting like a surgeon with a scalpel, examining. But as he examines, he's not discovering things and going, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that was there." But he's revealing things to us. And everything that he reveals, he brings those things out to help us and to heal us because he knows us thoroughly. Every molecule in our being, every thought, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, everything about us. He knows you thoroughly. He knows you personally. It says, when he says you have searched me and known me, that word know is talking about intimate, personal relationship. It's not that he just knows facts about you, but he knows you. He knows every detail about you. He made you. We'll talk about more about that in the psalm as well. And not only did he make you, but he knows every second of your life. Every second that has ever happened. Why? Because he's been with you. He knows you personally, and he knows you compassionately. He says there, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." The word Lord is in all capital letters there, not just because it's an important word, but because it is the most important word. It is the name for God. It is the Hebrew name, Yahweh. It is his personal name. And he is a God who has personal interest in it. He's the God of covenant. He's the God of relationship. He's the God who loves you enough that he wants you to know his name. It's kind of like when you go up to somebody and you say, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, and they go, "Oh, call me Bob," or "Call me John," or "Call me Sue," using their personal name. That's what he's saying. He's saying, don't just call me a God way up there. Call me Yahweh. It's who I am. It's who I am. Not only that, but his love for us is so personal that he loved enough to pay the price to keep the covenant. He's a covenant God, and we broke covenant with him a long time ago, and he paid the price that we deserve for breaking covenant so that we could enter into a new covenant with him, into a new relationship with him, into a personal relationship with him. Jesus knows you. And everywhere you go and everything that you do, you are at his feet. Not only does he know you, but he knows what you're doing. That's what these verses reveal here. He knows what you're doing. He says, first of all there, he knows your activity. Verse 2 says, you know my sitting down and my rising up. You know everything that I'm doing. You know, when you think about that, how many times during a day do you sit down and rise up and sit down and rise up? He knows every time you've done that. I can't remember every time I did it yesterday. Sometimes as I get older, I do it a lot more because I forget things. I'll sit down and go, oh yeah, and I have to get up and go do that. And then when I go up to do that, I'll get distracted and I'll do something else and come sit down and say, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. And I have to get up again and stuff and sit down and get up and sit down and get up. He knows every time you did it yesterday, the day before. He knows every time you've done it this year. He knows every time you've done it in your lifetime. And for some of us, that's a lot of sitting down and getting up. But he knows every one. He knows our activity. He knows your thoughts. He says, you understand my thoughts afar off, there in verse 2. The word understand there means that he discerns between. And you think everything that goes on in this brain, you may think it's just a bunch of rocks in there or something like that. But there's a lot of activity that goes on in this brain. It's not all intelligent activity, but a lot of that activity that goes on. And you think about that. In here, I've got my thoughts. In here is where the Satan comes against me and tempts me, not necessarily my thoughts, but it's his activity that's going on there. There are all these past memories that I've already put under the blood of Jesus, but I still have the memory of what I've done that come in there. And then you have the Holy Spirit as well speaking in there and telling me what to do. He discerns all of that. He knows every bit of it, where it's coming from, what it's going on. He knows my thoughts. And notice he says here that he knows my thoughts afar off. That doesn't mean that he knows them from a distance, but it means he knows them before I even think them. He knows it far off in the future. He's already there. He already knows what I think before I even think it. A matter of fact, and Jesus, that was part of his ministry when he was here on this earth. As he was ministering, the scribes would come and they began to think things, and he'd expose what they were thinking because he knows what we're thinking. He knows our journey. Verse 3. Says there, you comprehend my paths, and my lying down are acquainted with my ways. Paths speaking of every movement, ways speaking of every place our foot has touched here on this earth. He knows where we have been because he was there. And he knows where you're going because he's not a God of time and he's already there. I don't know exactly how that works, but he is. Wherever I've been in the past, I've been at the feet of Jesus. I may not have recognized that and responded that way, but wherever I'm going in the future, I will be at the feet of Jesus. He knows our journey. He knows your speech. For there's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it all together. Every syllable, every utterance. That's what the idea of word is, not just the spoken word, but it's the idea of it even as I begin to form it and my lips begin to move towards saying it. He already knows it before it even comes out. Before it even comes out. You know, we talk enough to fill up a book. For some of us, it may just be a first grade reader. For some of us, it may be multiple encyclopedias. But he knows every word. He knows what you're doing. Now, that can convict us, or it can comfort us. It's a call to holiness to know that every moment we're at his feet, but it's also a call to encouragement, a call to strength, to know that he knows everything. Why? Because he's there. And right now, he's here. He's here. He knows you. And you know what he does? This is the truth of what we really need to capture here today. He knows all of that. But what does he do? Go, oh, I can't believe you did. No, not at all. It says, you have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Wow. When he says laid your hand upon it, he doesn't mean to discipline. He's talking about comfort. First of all, he says there, he covers us. He hedges us. Behind and in front, we are surrounded by him. We're at his feet, but as we are at his feet, he puts his arms around us. He covers us. He covers our sin. Psalm 32:1 says, blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Who covers it? God covers it. He covers us up our sin, but also he covers us in protection and in comfort there. He is there, and as we are at his feet, he wraps his arms around us and covers us completely. Not only does he cover us, but he comforts us. He lays his hand upon us, again, not in discipline, but in comfort. It's the idea of taking the hand of God. Do you realize right here, right now, he has his hand. You can take his hand. Not only can you take his hand, but he has his hand upon you. You know, I recognize that with Isla at times. There are times when she's a little bit scared, especially if it's a big crowd of grown-ups that she doesn't know or something like that, at least initially, and then she'll kind of get a little close and reach up and take your hand because she's a little bit scared. But then I notice there are other times where she's not as aware of the situation. There's a lot of people around, but she may be caught up in something that's going on, and I think this may not be the safest place for her, and I reach down and take her hand. You're in the hands of Jesus. You're in the hands of Jesus. He covers us. He comforts us. And then notice in verse 6, he comes to us. He says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's high, I cannot attain it. And we would say, well, that's what separates us from God. But that's not what he's talking about in this passage. He's talking about him being there. He's saying this is what we deserve. God is beyond us. He's beyond us in his grace. He's beyond, and yet he comes to us. He's there for us. He is with us every moment of every day. You say, I don't get it. Why, God, why do you care for me? I don't understand that. And that's what he's talking about right here. He says, I don't understand why you care for me. I don't understand how you can love me in spite of everything that I do. But he's always there for us. He is beyond and above us, yet he comes to us. He knows everything about, he knows our activity. He knows our thoughts. He knows our journey. He knows our mistakes. He knows our failures. He knows our speech and our failures there now. But he will not leave us. He comes to us. He's there for us. He's there for us. Even in the deepest depths of our failures and sins, we're at the feet of Jesus. We're at the feet of Jesus. Will you come to him? Will you recognize that? You're not coming to his feet. You're already at his feet. Would you just recognize in your hardship, in your challenges, yes, even in our failures, that we are at the feet of Jesus.